Hello and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is Antonis Nikolopoulos, also known as Soloup, author of the graphic novel Aivali, a story of Greeks and Turks in 1922, which was published in English late last year. Hello, Antonis, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for your invitation, David.
You're welcome. This book is personal for you, as your grandparents are mainly from Izmir. I learned in the book, which you write that I think two of them witnessed the Great Fire of Smyrna in 1922 and then fled to Greece around that time. I wonder what do you view, which do you view as your homeland, Anatolia or Greece?
All of my ancestors were from main Eurasia, today Turkey. Two grandmothers and two grandfathers. Two grandmothers were from Izmir, Smyrna, and another grandfather was from Chesme, and another from Bahindie, all in the area around Izmir. So I love very much all this site, for that reason I'm working about the graphical novel Aivali. My inspiration was my grandma Maria's stories about that period, and it was another travel for me to write about my ancestors and my origins. After 40, everyone want to know about his origins, about your soul and his existence. So it was a trip, an inner trip for me and for my origins, for my ancestors, and their stories about
remnants of Anatolia in your family life today. Any traditions that you maintain that are from this part of the world, not from Greece?
It's complicated because I'm Greek. I have this culture, but at the same time, Anatolia is not a word that we use here in Greece. We are Romios, and we're feeling that Anatolia, main Eurasia, is another place for our souls, our origins. When I was in Turkey and talk with some people there in Aivali about my origins, thinking that are you a Turk? So it's very interesting how two different cultures and two nationalities at the same time you can living and working together in some area of the story of the history.
Yeah, the book begins and ends with your trip to Mytilene and taking the ferry over to Aivali. I thought it was fascinating that you consider the Turkish quarter of Mytilene as your part of town, and yet when you would look across the sea and see the Turkish hills, you would see these Turkish hills as imposing and dangerous. So it's like at the same time, Turkey is partially your homeland, but it's also the enemy. That must be so difficult.
Yes, it's very interesting that feelings. These feelings, because the same place, the same view, has different meanings for all of us. I think happens with the same, because many today citizens of Aivali have their origins from Crete or Lesbos. And at the same time, maybe like me, have the same feelings, because Greeks for Turkey is an enemy, like a Turkey from Greek. But at the same time, we are people who have same feelings and same thoughts about the life. I have many Turks friends that thinking like me,
Yeah,
because the ordinary people will have not something to separate.
Yeah, I'm neither Turkish nor Greek. I'm an American, but
Mm.
after I was kicked out of Turkey in early 2016, I spent most of that summer on Chios, looking across the
Mm.
Aegean to the hills of Turkey where I could no longer go. Meanwhile, at that same time, I was writing about all the refugees coming from Turkey and looking for a new life, a new home in Greece and in Europe. And at the same time, Chians that I would speak to told me that they had arrived in the Greek islands as exiles as well. They had also been forced out of Turkey, like your family. So it just seemed to me like then, and now reading this book, that in those waters, history is constantly repeating itself.
Yes, this era all the time have the same stories. Um, People have to abandon their houses, and all the time the stories from Asia to Greek islands. We have refugees with the same way my ancestors came in Greece. And now, after 100 years, maybe you can find people to swimming uh, across the borders for a better life.
Hmm.
Um, yes, it's very interesting, and we can find many stories today, stories that are have the same view from my origins, from my ancestors.
You write in the book that if a country doesn't have an evil enemy, it will have to invent one. I wonder, do you think Greece and Turkey are imaginary enemies? Are there are the leaders of the countries to blame, or were these two countries, which are so similar but have different religions and some different traditions, were they bound to fight?
Yes, history does not proceed in a straight line. Historical facts have not only one interpretation, one reading. In every case, it's essential who is the viewer and which is your point of view. Most of the time, the kind of national narrative is based on a characteristic division, we and others. We usually represent the positive side, and the others represent, of course, the negative, dark, or evil side. So very often we blame the others. We consider that the others are responsible for our bad luck. For example, Greek blame Turks and vice versa. As I wanted to show in Aivali, um, um, this is not true because happens the same for both sides. In a wider point of view, Christians blame Muslims, Muslims blame Jews, Americans blame Russians, the North blame the South, and goes on. For this reason, I wanted to make graphic novel Aivali to contain the two opposed interpretations, the Greek and the Turkey. I have in my book some stories from four authors, three Greeks and one Turk. Ahmet Yorulmaz, if you know, from Aivali. And the other Greek authors are Venezis, Kondoglou, and Agape Venezi Moliviati, the sister of Venesis. So we have in my book two views about that problem of relations, Greek-Turkish relations and the war of 1922. One from a citizen of Aivali, Ahmed, born in Aivali, and at the same time the three authors, the Greek authors, born in Aivali before the war. So another point that I think is very interesting is the title of Aivali, the word of Aivali, of my graphic novel, because Aivali, I think you know better than me, that is queen's trees, the place that spring up queen's trees. The same word in Greek is Kidonies, the tree of queens. So we have a place today, the era of Aivali, that we have the same word in different languages. Aivali for Turks, Kidonies for Greeks. But until today, Greeks, we prefer to call this era Aivali without K. So I think the word in the title is a vessel that contains at the same time two different cultures and religions, West and East, Christians and Muslims, for the same place. It's
Why do
a
Greeks?
game.
Why do Greeks not use the Greek word? Why do they say Aivali?
Kidonies.
Right. Why do they use Aivali instead of Kibonias?
Because all today Greeks and in that period uses in everyday life the name Aivali with without K as in Turks. So it's that word connect two civilizations, two cultures about that place at coexistence.
I see. It's interesting. So the Turks called it Ayvalık, but the Greek Turks called it Aivali. So it was basically a Greek version of the Turkish word.
Okay. Yes.
I thought the Zahra Agape story was lovely. I mean,
Yes.
for our listeners, let me just tell a little bit. So, a Turkish soldier has three sisters who are killed by Greek forces during the war, including his favorite youngest daughter, Zahra. And this Turkish soldier, because of this, vows to kill all the Greeks he can in vengeance for the killing of his not his daughters, his sisters. But then he sees Agape in the street pleading for help, and to him, she looks exactly like his sister Zahra, and he ends up taking her in and then saving her life. It's an amazing story. Is this a true story of what happened to Venezi's sister? And what did this story mean to you? What did this story tell you about Aivali?
We ordinary people from two sides, the Greeks and the Turks, we have the same stories. In a war, we are the victims. So we have same stories and same feelings about the war, the trauma of death of relevance that loses in a war. So that story was very sentimental for me because an enemy, a Turk soldier, rescued a Greek girl, a Greek refugee. The same time, in the story of Ahmed Yorulmaz, we have the same story from a different side. So there is a Greek woman that rescued a Turkish. So all the book has playing with that stories that at the same time is people that want connections and feelings and want a friendship for the other. But is the war and all these powers around us that separate us.
Right. There's also the story of the Cretan Turk moving to Aivali in the population transfer. On Crete, he had been called a Turk, and now in Aivali, he's called an infidel by his fellow Turks. Probably the same thing happens going in the reverse. The Greeks who were living in Turkey were seen as outsiders, and then when they arrive in Greece, they're seen as Turks. Did something like this happen to your family when it moved?
Yes. My grandma was in Izmir in the port when we have all this violence and the disaster for Greeks. So many stories, and my family was some of the stories that you can read in my graphic novel.
The book ends with a meeting between a Cretan Turk whose family left Greece for Turkey long ago, and you, or your character, whose family moved in the other direction. You call them the bastards of Lausanne, and
Yes.
you acknowledge that their love of their homeland is very complicated. What I found was really good about that section of the book, the conversation between Antonis and Mehmet, is that they were able to bond in this short time together, but they also had disagreements. Like, you didn't make it too easy for them to get along.
Yes, is how you can see anytime the same things. If you want to view like a fanatic or a nationalist, that you can find in both sides, everything is very difficult. But I know many Turks and many Greeks that are thinking like me, who want to live in peace. In the last chapter of Aivali, of a graphic novel Aivali, you can find another same discussion about Greeks and Turks, that they want to speak about coexistence and friendship, and this way is that you say before the grandchildren of Lausanne, because two sides have we have the same trauma from our ancestors. So it's another way to see the conflict and the enemy of the others in this era of the world.
Right. Yeah. You've also done political cartoon. You've also done political cartoons, I believe, right? I
Yes.
wonder what sort of political cartoon you might create for this current moment right now, with Turkey agitating in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, and Greek and Cypriot officials using terms like pirate state to describe their neighbor, and people talking of war again. What sort of
Yes.
political cartoon might you create for this moment to describe it?
Yes, one of the most famous characters in this period, of course, is Erdogan. A cartoonist have to sketches and make humor about all the politicians like Mitsotakis or before the Tsipras, etc. But for the problems like the East Mediterranean today, Erdogan has a central role, of course. So I have many sketches with the Erdogan, but the way is that we have a problem in Mediterranean we can solve with justice, with an international court of justice, or maybe the first thing to think about him is that he's both crazy and dangerous. Of course, as we're talking about international diplomacy, he's not a crazy, but a leader who feels confident with the weapons. But the solution of all these problems are not, of course, the violence.
Last question. Yeah.
We have common points in culture, we have common experiences and trauma of wars. So we have many things to add our lives, not to separate.
Speaking of sketches, there's a lot of love. I felt like there's a lot of love in the imagery of Mytilene and Aivali and Taxiarchis. These places look beautiful in the book.
Yes.
Was that an important concern for you, making sure that these places were appealing, that your drawings were true?
All this area is a very beautiful place. The area of Aivali and Mytilene is a paradise. If you have you ever seen in the blue waters of Aivali or Mytilene? It's a very wonderful place. And another level is what happened with the environment and the tourism. If we have problems with gas and all that, I don't know. It's a very beautiful place, and I think it's a place that connect our people.
It seems like things like efforts like Aivali, your book, are a good way to remind the Greeks and Turks that they have so much in common, more than what separates them right now.
Exactly. You can find fanatics and nationalists on both sides, but I think Turks and Greeks, we want to live in peace. And can you imagine, and this sounds a little utopian, how much profit people would have if the money for guns want to improve our lives, the citizens' lives? They are talking about profit from the oil and gas that they will find, but they bought so expensive weapons for that reason. Do you imagine if that money are hoping to get from gas has spent for our lives? I don't know. My point of view is not from a big story, from the story that we'll have to see on TV with politicians and diplomacy. Our stories from my graphic novel Aivali is everyday life stories from our ancestors, and I want to indicate to the humanitarian feelings about the life and coexistence.
Yeah, Antonis Nikolopoulos, thank you so much for your time and talking to us about your book.
Thank you very much, me too, dear David.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.